Hi, and welcome back for this first episode of the series, which is about making our first feature, which will be a clicker, a basic clicker. Before anything, we will begin by creating just a few folders, which will serve later for organizing resources, files, etc. So the first folder I'm going to create is scenes, and also I will create a scripts folder. Okay. Godot allows you to use colors within for the folders, right? So I'm gonna have teal, no, blue scenes. Let's have blue scenes and pink scripts. All right. So let's create a scene for the clicker prototype that we will make on this video. And we will create a green node, a user interface node, that will be the root node of this scene. Okay. I will instantly rename it prototype clicker and save it into the scenes folder, create a prototypes subfolder, and again a clicker folder to have the scene in there. I will leave the name to prototype clicker, which is based on the name of the node I've created there. Okay, I'm saving this, and there we go. My scene is saved. Whoops. It's saved and ready to go. For a clicker, we need the minimum that we need is a button and a label that will display the current amount of resources we have created. So we can do this by right-clicking the root node and adding child nodes. So, well, we already have the label here. So let's create the label and the button. The order doesn't matter here because the two nodes are not going to be overlapping. So there's no problem with which one is in front of which one. In the many things we have to do, we will begin by positioning our two objects. So objects on the canvas, let's say, um, are positioned with X and Y properties for the position, right? But we can have some tools which help us position things more easily. And those tools are anchors. So let's start with the button. On the middle of the tools, on the screen on the top here, we have the anchor tool, right? And we can choose one preset of anchor for the button, and we will choose center, right? So this will just center the button, right? Rather simple. As for the label, we will choose the top wide anchor. So this one says, I want you to stick to the top and take the whole horizontal space available, right? That's what this one does. Let's go back to the button. Right now we have just a little square, which is way too small. So we're gonna pick the button and jump into the inspector to give it a minimum size. And that size you can modify it by going in the control category and layout. And there you have the custom minimum size, X and Y. So I'm gonna give it 320 and 80 pixels, right? It's a little bit bigger. We will do the same for the label, except that we don't need to give it an X value because it is defined by the parent, the container. We will just give it a 80 pixel height, right? So now we can add some placeholder text to know what's happening. So here the button will create Stardust. So we're just going to say create Stardust on the button. As for the label, it will display the current amount of Stardust we have. So it's going to be Stardust, colon, and then value. All right. The text is on the corner here, which is not ideal. So we can simply tinker with the alignment properties right there to have center for the vertical and horizontal alignment, which already looks much better. There's a way to have the text of the label bigger. There's I'm going to say long way by using the label settings, but there's a short way by scrolling down to the theme category here, where we have type variation and we have different types for the label, where we can choose header large, which makes the text instantly bigger, which is cool. So there we have all we need for the prototype to work. We have the nodes, and it's just a matter of creating a script and connecting everything together to have things working. So to create a script, you can right click, attach script, use the attach script button. You can create the script manually in the folder, right? It's all the same. So let's use the attach script button to attach a script to the root node prototype clicker, all right? The suggested name is perfectly okay because it's just the same name but in a different writing. And I usually uncheck the templates because I like having a clean slate when I create a new script. So there we go. We have the extends control, which is a line we can't remove because what it says is here we have a node type control, right? And these scripts will be a new definition of control, but with more things, more properties, more functions, right? So it has to take all the properties and methods that control has, and we will add stuff to it. Okay. First thing first, I will name the class, the script, by giving it a name, which is going to be prototype clicker, right? Exactly the same as I gave to the node. Okay. Now let's see. We have a button, we have a label, so we will need a reference to those things. And also we have an amount of Stardust that will increase each time we are clicking on the button. Let's start with the Stardust variable, okay? We're gonna create a variable named Stardust, right, which will store the value. This is the shortest syntax to create a variable. Var keyword, name of the variable, done. That's it. But we have a warning which says variable Stardust has no static type, right? So right now it can be a number, it can be a string, like text, string is text. It can be a node, it can be pretty much anything, which is not what we want. We want it to be an integer, which is a number without decimal. And now we have specified that we want an integer here, and the warning's gone. All right. Another thing we can do is initializing this variable to 0. To say at the start of the project, when we launch the game, I want it to be equal to 0. All right. So we have the variable. Now we need references for both the button and the label, right? As for the label, why is my nose itchy? As for the label, we're going to create a new variable, which we will name just label, okay? Again, we need to type it, and this time, since we're referencing this object here, we're going to type the variable with the type of the object, which is, again, label, but with an uppercase, right? How to initialize this? That's the problem. We have two ways to do that. The first one is right there in the script by using methods, and the second one is by using the editor. And we will use the editor because it is easier and there is nothing that the other version will give us. So we just add an export tag in front of the variable we want to set up with the editor. Okay. To see this variable here, I just pick the prototype clicker, which has the script, right? And in the inspector, here is the variable label, and I can assign something to it, which is the node label, right? And there we go. We have created a connection between the label here and the variable here. They are now the same thing. I mean, no, not really, but this variable is a reference to that node here. It's more like this. As for the button, we don't need a direct reference to the button because we only need to know when the player clicks on the button. That's all we need to know, all right? And this comes in the form of a signal. So if you click on the node tab here, you have access to all the signals which are emitted by this node button, right? And on the very top, we have base button signals, including pressed signals, which is what we will be using, right? So in short, every time the button is pressed by user input, it will emit a signal saying, hey, I'm pressed. Does anyone care? At the moment, absolutely no one cares about it, but we will create a connection between this signal and our script. So we just have this helper here. We pick the node with the script we want to create a method in, and I'm just gonna leave the name as it is and connect. All right? So we created a connection here, which appears in the inspector as well, which is basically telling us that now our script cares about the button when the button says, hey, someone clicked on me, right? So we have connected both the label and the button to the script, okay? What we need is a method to be able to create Stardust now, right? Because the button is pressed, we know when it is pressed. When it is pressed, we have this function being triggered, but, well, what do we do? We're gonna create a new function, which I will name create Stardust. Stardust, all right? To create a function, here is the shortest syntax. Function keyword, name of the function, and parentheses. To tell, do we have arguments with this function? Yes and no. Well, here no, we have no arguments, it's just going to be empty parentheses. A colon to begin the indenting block, and that's it. We can put a pass instruction, and that's the minimum syntax of a function. But again, we have an error, not an error, a warning, which is the function has no return type. So we don't know what the function does. Is the function supposed to give us a number? Is it supposed to do its thing, manipulating data, and that's it? Well, we don't know. So that's why we're going to type it as void. The void function is a function that returns nothing. It just goes through a set of instruction and that's it, right? And that's exactly what we want. a method that will increase the amount of Stardust we have, and that's all, right? So now we can change the instruction of the function by saying I want to increase the amount of Stardust by 1. So we have here a reference to this variable, which we declared. We use the plus equal operator, which adds basically whatever is after it, which is 1. And there we go. That's what the method does. Okay? Now it's just a matter of when we know the button is pressed, we want to trigger this method, which is create Stardust. We call the function, again, just by referencing the name of it without the func keyword, which is used for the declaration. You could argue that we could have this Stardust plus equal 1 here, right? It's true, you could, but it's less clear what does what, okay? Because here we have a function which clearly does create Stardust, okay? And here it's just I react to the button being pressed. And it's important because if in the future we want to change a behavior of either the button or the Stardust creation, then we know where to go, okay? I know that if I want to change the Stardust creation, I have to go in create Stardust and not in on button pressed, right? That's why I have created another function here, okay? So now when we click on the button, the Stardust value is increasing, which is exactly what we want. But we still have no feedback. So I'm gonna create a method that updates the value of the text of the label here, right? So if you want to know exactly what property of an object you need to access, you have several ways, right? Because here we have a label typed label, and that's a complex object with many different properties. The first way to find the property is to pick the node in the scene tree and go in the inspector. There you can hover over whatever you want to edit, and you will have in the tooltip the reference to the property you want to edit. Here, text, right? Easy. There's another way, which is using the Godot documentation, right? So you click the search help here, look for the label objects, and you will have a documentation page with absolutely all the properties of the label, all the methods, right? And all the inheritances. So here, if we look quickly, we have the text, which we want to edit, right? We know it is a string, and we can have the description of it, which is the text to display on screen, which is exactly what we want to edit, okay? So let's create a new function, which is going to be update label text. It's going to be a void function, and now we have the reference to the label, which we take a reference, and we access its property using a dot, and we choose the property we want to edit, which is text. There we go. So now we have the text of the label here, and we want to update it using the equal operator to give it a new value, which is going to be Stardust, let's say 2 at the moment, right? So here is the new property for the text of the label, the new value, sorry. In order to make this text reflect the value here, we will include a reading of this variable here in the text. To do this, you can use %s operator within the text to further in the line after, right, outside of the string quotes, use again this %operator and name the variable you want to have in there, right, which is Stardust. Okay. Now we have the function to edit the text. So when do we call the function? Well, basically, anytime we have changed the value of Stardust, right? So every time we create Stardust, we also want to update the label to reflect any change that we made, all right? I'm just bringing this down for some organizing reasons. I want the underscore methods to be at the very bottom of the class. That's just something you do for styling. All right. So we still have something missing, but we can start the project now. I mean, run the scene by using this button here, run current scene, all right? And it should be working, right? Oh no, oh, did we reference the label? Yes, we did reference the label. So now we can click the button and create Stardust, and the label is updating, showing us how many Stardust we have, which is exactly what we want. But you may have noticed that indeed, when we start the game, we have a problem. Here we have nothing. So we can fix this with different approaches. The first one is to, well, set the value here to 0, which is okay in a sense, but will not help if we load data, right? So let's say that we load data and we begin with 15 Stardust and we still have 0 and we click 16, that's weird. So what we can do instead is use a method that's named ready. Can you give me the... Yes. And the ready function is a built-in method in any node, right? Every node can access this method. And here we're gonna define what this method will do, right? This method is basically called whenever a node is created. So here, the node label is created when the game starts. And when the game starts, we want to initialize the label to reflect value that we have given here. So we're just simply gonna call the update label function from there, right? And that's it. When we start the game, we have the value that we have defined within the script, and we can keep increasing it. I'm leaving it at the top of the script, even though I said that underscore functions go at the bottom, because it's just not any underscore function. It's a built-in function, right? So the ready function, which is running when a node is created, that's it. We leave it at the top, again, for styling. So that's it. We have the working prototype. And now, the very last thing we can add, if we want to go full clean code some way, is to document this little prototype here by giving descriptions to things we have created. In order to document a class with Godot, you just have to use double sharps, one space, and whatever you want to describe, okay? So this double sharps that comes sticked to the extends and class name, that's the description of the class. So let's say a clicker prototype, creating Stardust. There we go. Then you can document each variables, right? So that's reference reference to the label displaying the current amount of Stardust created. Then we're going to document this variable current amount of Stardust created, and we can document the functions. So the function ready will initialize the label at launch. The create Stardust will add one Stardust or create one Stardust, right? The update label will update the text of the label to reflect the new change in Stardust amount. That's not the best way to word it, but an unbutton press, which is triggered when the create Stardust button is pressed. So there we go. We have the, in a way, cleanest code we can do. We have typed every variable, every functions, and we have documented everything. Documenting is important when you're working on a project that basically lasts more than a week. Because anything you go back to within a week, maybe a month, it will depend on your brain memory, I guess. You will completely forget about it, and you will read your code as a new person, sort of. So it's important to have different cues to tell you and help you read it, right? Another reason is that now we have a new entry in the documentation here. So if I look for prototype clicker, this entry exists, and I have a documentation page with the properties, the methods, and the description and each and everything, which is cool to have. Really, it is cool. So let's see. Let's have a last look at the prototype. There we go. We can create Stardust, and that's it. I'm just gonna bring it back to 0, and that's it. The prototype is done, and it's working. Well, I have nothing more to say about it. So thank you for watching this very first episode of the series. I hope you liked it, and I will see you later for more complex features to implement. So yeah. Alright, so after ending the video, I just remembered that I didn't commit the changes we made. So I think that's interesting to show you in case you didn't watch the introduction video, or if you're still not sure how to work the version controlling, but we're just going to stage all the changes that we made. Why do we have project.godot changed? Okay. You can check each and every new thing, right? If you want to say, okay, this will go in one commit and this other change will go in another commit, that you can be a little bit more precise. But anyway, I will create a new one, which will be clicker prototype. And there we go. Commit changes to 3 files, and that's it.